So this is what we're making today. In the next 20 minutes or so, maybe we'll take a couple of minutes longer this one, but it's a nice, fun isometric game, and you have to interact with some objects and then ultimately open a chest that represents the goal of this game. As you can see, it works quite nicely on a phone as well. As usual, let's start by going to clockworkchili.com/wave, and here I'm going to create a blank project called Isometric Adventure. We have an empty scene to start with, and we click this orange icon on the top bar called Repo Browser. As you know, this lets us browse some pre-made assets. In this case, I want to locate the isometric tiles repository, and as you can see, this contains 3 files only, and these are prefabs. A prefab is a collection of things. It could contain scene objects, terrain tiles, sounds, scripts. Let's see what these ones contain. You can hover your mouse over them and it will tell you, but I'm also going to drag each one of them into our game to take a closer look at them. And this is going to download a bunch of assets into our project. When it's done, I'm going into the folder view to see what it's actually done. And it's created a tilesets folder that contains these 3 files, these 3 prefab files. It's also got a couple of PNG files that are sprite sheets that contain a lot of sprites. This one contains isometric objects, this one contains terrain tiles. Also, we have an ISO characters folder with a sheep folder that contains some animation sprite sheets, and similarly, the swordsman folder contains some animation sprite sheets for a swordsman character. You can obviously add your own images, replace these images and do whatever you like, but for this tutorial we're just going to use these pre-made assets to be quicker. Now I'm going to create an isometric terrain by clicking this button here. Initially this is 2 by 2, but I will make it 8 by 8 for this game. I also recommend clicking this button here and making sure that isometric grid is selected, because this will show a nice grid that will make it easier for us to identify the tiles on the isometric terrain. This only affects the editor. This grid is not visible in the game, but it will make our lives a little bit easier when editing this map. Now I've got this, I'm going back into my tilesets folder, and I'm going to open this flat iso terrain prefab. I'm going to select, well, there is no scene objects here, so I've just hidden this, but there are isometric terrain tiles. There are 498 of them. I'm going to select the grass tile. I'm going to select this paint tiles button, and now by clicking and dragging the mouse, I can paint everything with grass, which gives us a nice starting point for our game. But to make it more interesting, I'm also going to add a river that runs across the scene like that. As you can see, we have 2 types of terrain tiles here. We have full terrain tiles at the top. We also have these other ones that are meant to be overlaid on top of the base terrain tiles. So for example, if I wanted to create some river banks, I would select this one and paint on top of the grass. But if I paint it now, while paint tiles is selected, this would just override the grass tiles. Instead, I'm going to select paint transitions, and this allows me to paint on top of the base layer. I'm going to do the same for the bottom part of the river. As you can see, we have 3 of these buttons: paint tiles, paint transitions, and paint details. Essentially, we have 3 layers for the isometric terrain, and they're called tiles, transition, and details because that's what you would normally use them for in an isometric game. So some base terrain, some transitions like that on top, and some details on top. But essentially, it's just layer 0, 1, and 2, if you like, that you can use for any purpose. It doesn't have to be transitions and details. But for this game, that's what we're going to do. So now I've done that, I want to add some sand for the top part of the map. By selecting paint tiles, I ensure that I am painting the bottom layer only. You can see that the water transition is still on top. Okay, so now let's run the game. Let's see what it looks like. And it doesn't look like much because we are always looking at the bottom corner of the map. But we obviously want to change that. So again, I'll go to the repo browser. To be quick, there is a script here in camera controls that's called mouse wheel to zoom. I'm going to drag this script into my game. Now I can zoom out and in by using my mouse wheel. I say mouse wheel, but this would work on any device. So if you were running this on a touchscreen device, it would also respond to a pinch to zoom type of gesture. However, we're still looking at the bottom part of the map. We can reveal more of it, but the camera is centered around this bottom corner. To change that, I'm going to first add a character, and then we'll sort out the camera coordinates. So I'm going back to my folder view, and this time I'm opening the ISO characters repository. There is a sheep and a swordsman. Don't ask why, I don't know why we had a sheep and a swordsman, but that's what we've got, so that's what we're going to use for this game. I'm going to drag this swordsman guy into the scene, say here, for example. You can see, if I go into the properties tab, you can see that it's been set up already as an isometric object here. The grid type is set to isometric. And in the behaviors tab, it's already been set up as an ISO character. It's got an ISO character behavior. ISO character is one of the behaviors that are built into Wade. In this case, this provides some basic functionality for pathfinding on the isometric grid. And it also provides a set of common functions that you would normally use in most isometric games, and we're going to use some of them in a moment. For now, I'm going to click the Functions tab for this swordsman character, and in the onAddToScene event, I'm going to say wade.setCameraTarget_this. This will ensure that the camera is always centered on the swordsman character, so when this moves, the camera will follow as well. This will always be in the middle of the screen. And now I want this swordsman to move when I click the terrain. So how do we do that? First of all, there is a function that we can use. So if we create a function with a special name that's called onIsoTerrainMouseDown, then this function will be called by Wade every time we click the terrain. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going into my folder view now, back into the root of my project, and click New File, and create a new file called Controls. It is a script file, so a JavaScript file, that is going to be added to the current scene assets, okay? Nice blank file. Create a new function called wait.app.onIsoTerrain, capital T, mouse down. So this function is called automatically by Wade when I click the terrain. It is passed a data object. I'm not quite sure what this data object contains, so I'm going to just console log data. And then I click the terrain, and I can see in the logs here the data object that is passed into this function. And it contains a lot of things really, but the one that we care about is this one called grid chords. It's got an X field and a Z field that describe the tile that we've just clicked. So in the isometric world, we have two main axes. X is this one, 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on. And Z is this axis here, 0, 1, 2, and so on. So with X and Z, we can identify any tile on the isometric grid. And if we go back to the Behaviors tab, we can see in the documentation for this function called setDestination that we can call this function and pass it an object with X and Z to tell the character where to go. That's exactly what we're going to do now. _.swordsman dot get behavior iso character. This gives us access to this object here with these properties and these functions. So we can do set destination data.grid chords. Now this implies that when we click somewhere on the terrain, the character goes there, which is very cool, but we still have a little problem because we can easily walk over the water to reach the other side of the river, because we haven't really said anything about collisions with the water. That's what we're going to do now by going back into the folder view and by reopening the flat isoterrain prefab. If I select the water tile, you can see that collision is set to false. I want it true, so I can not walk on the water. However, this now will apply to all future instances of this tile, so if I paint more water tiles, those will be collidable, but the ones that are already in the scene are not going to be collidable unless I click this Apply Changes to Current Scene button. This makes sure that all the water tiles in the scene have this set of properties defined here. So they will be collidable now. And you can see that now if I click the sand bit, I cannot reach it because the water is collidable and there is no way to reach that part of the game, that part of the map. So that's good, but it's not exactly what I wanted because I want a way to go there. So I'm selecting this stony path tile and I'm painting it here to replace the grass. You can see that the water transition is still on top of it. I can remove it by clicking the terrain and selecting this Remove Transitions button, which allows me to just remove the transition. And now I have a nice road that allows me to get there. There is a pathfinding algorithm that comes with Wade. So if I click here, the character will automatically find the best path to reach that destination. Now I want to add a goal for us to achieve in this game. I want to add a chest that we can go and open, and it will maybe contain some treasure. We'll see what it will contain, but for now let's just add the chest by going to folder view, opening the outdoor ISO objects prefab. This one contains a few things, including a chest, which I'm going to place right there. Well, right there is fine. So this chest, again, let's go to the properties. You can see it is an isometric object too, but it's not quite right because it's not in the middle of its tile. Let's position it correctly. Yes, it's in the middle of the tile now, and you can see it's on a yellow tile, which means it's collidable. We will not be able to occupy the same tile as the chest. I'm also going to rename it and just call it lowercase chest because it's going to be slightly easier then for me. And if I look into the sprites, I can see that it contains two sprites, this first one and this other one when the chest is open. So I'm going to call this one open actually, and I'm going to call the other sprite closed, which will make it easier to reference them later. But the goal really is to go to the chest and then switch sprites. So show the sprite that with the chest open and hide the sprite with the chest closed. At the moment, you can see that the closed one is set to visible, the open one is not set to visible, but I will set to visible when appropriate. You also, as you can see, when I set this to visible, if you look up here, it doesn't quite line up with the other closed sprite. That's easy to fix by changing this offset value here. Okay, now they approximately line up. I want to hide this and I will show it when appropriate. So how do we get the character to open the chest? The idea is that you click the chest and then something happens, right? So in the chest, we go in the on mouse down function. And here, first of all, we tell the character to move towards the chest. And that's easy because if you select the character again and look in the behavior, you will see that it's got a goToObject function that does just that. So if I select the chest now, and then on mouse down, I can do _.swordsman dot get behavior iso character dot go to object this. This will tell the character to go towards the chest when the chest is clicked. But how do we open it? Well, again, if you look in the behavior functions, go to object has got a description that says when the character reaches the object, an on-object reached event is fired. All we have to do to intercept this event and to react to this event is add a function with a matching name to this character. So onObject reached is the function that we want to have. It's not, if I go to the functions list, it's not in the list of the predefined functions, but I can add it like that. And now on object reached _.chest.getSprite open set visible true _.chest getSprite closed set visible false. I hope this is self-explanatory. Basically, we're telling the chest to switch sprites, to show the one that is called open and to hide the other one. You can see I click the chest, I go there, or rather I go next to it because the chest is collidable, so I go to tile next to it, and then this code is executed and that switches sprites. So this is already mildly interesting, but I will make it more interesting still by adding another character. We've only got a sheep, so there's only so much we can do, but we'll try to make good use of this sheep that we've got. So let's go back to our folder view here, and let's select the ISO characters prefab and drag the sheep into the scene. Now the sheep itself is an isometric object, but as you can see, it is on a green tile. Now, let's explain this a bit better. We have two buttons here, a green one and a red one. The green one allows me to paint tiles to say which tiles this object is occupying in the world. This has nothing to do with collisions. It's just so I can ask Wade what's at tile X and Z, and then Wade will look into these green maps and see which objects are occupying that tile. But the sheep will only occupy one tile, so I don't need all these. But the red button here instead, that tells Wade which tiles should be collidable when the sheep is there. And you can see you can edit these independently. You can edit collisions independently from the tiles that the object is occupying. But you can also edit them at the same time by selecting both of them, in which case the tiles will be yellow. Okay, so this one is already green. I want to add red to it to make it collidable. I hope that makes sense. So now the sheep is collidable. It means we cannot occupy the same tile as the sheep. So effectively, now there is no way to reach the other side of the river. To do that, we want to get the sheep to move out of the way. So the idea is that I hit the sheep with my sword and the sheep then starts walking and then it goes away. Okay, we'll do just that. So the sheep is selected. I go to its functions, and in here on mouse down, _.swordsman dot go to dot get behavior. I don't have to write ISO character every time. There is only one behavior, so if I just write get behavior, it will give me the ISO character behavior. Dot get behavior dot go to object this, and then I select the character, and when we reach the object, we're already doing something when we reach an object. Actually, that's a good point. So if I click the sheep, you can see I'm going to reach the sheep, and when I reach the sheep, the chest opens. because this code is going to be executed every time we reach any object. But really we want to do this if data.object is the chest. Yeah, then we do that. But if data.object instead is the sheep, then we do something else. And specifically, we do swordsman.play animation. You can see we have an attack animation here. This sprite comes with a bunch of animations, and they have some specific names that Wade and specifically the ISO character behavior recognizes. Because if you call things idle and walk and so on, then the ISO character behavior knows to use those animations when the character is walking or when the character is idle. In addition, we also have these attack animations, and they're all called _ISO_direction. So you see SE stands for southeast, that's the direction we're facing. NW stands for northwest, that's facing the opposite direction, and so on. So let's say that we play attack_ISO_SE. Okay, so when I do that, I place that animation. However, there is a small problem with it. You can see if I click the sheep now, when I reach the sheep, I play that animation, but depends on where I am in the scene, right? So if I'm here and I click the sheep, I approach the sheep from this angle and I play this animation, I'm no longer facing the sheep, so that's a bit wrong. Essentially, when you call go to object, but that object is collidable, you cannot go to that exact tile, you'll just go to any tile next to it, and more specifically the one that's closest to you. But to have a more predictable behavior, we can have a better look at the documentation for a go-to-object that says if the object has an interaction offset field set in its object data, then the character will try to go there. So let's see, we select the sheep, go into its properties, and add a custom property called interaction offset. And this will be of type object because it will contain X and Z. Now I set X to Z to 0 and Z to 1, which indicates this tile here with respect to the sheep's position. So this, regardless of where I am now in the scene, even if I'm here and I click the sheep, I always go all the way here and then I play my animation, which is correct because now the animation will always be the right one and will always ensure that I'm facing the sheep. Now I'll select the character again and go into its onObjectReach function. So I play that animation. I also say swordsman.onAnimationEnd equals function. So I decide what happens when the animation is over. Well, first of all, I want the sheep, get behavior, set destination. I want the sheep to move out of the way. Let's say the sheep goes here, which is X0Z1. Okay, I also want to say, this is important, swordsman.onAnimationEnd equals null. So I'm saying, let's forget about doing this every time an animation ends. We want to do this once, and then I'm going to override the animation end event handler with null to say, do not do this anymore, just do it one time. And finally, I also want to do swordsman.playAnimationIdle ISO SE. Okay. Oh, and this should be swordsman. Sorry, mistake there. So let's see, when I play the game now, I say I go here and then click the sheep. And the sheep will start moving, but it's not playing the right type of animation, unfortunately. And that's because the animation name for the sheep doesn't match what the ISO character behavior is expecting. You can see someone's made a mistake here. This walk animation should have been called walk_ISO with a lowercase I. Sorry about that, I don't know who made this file, but whoever made it obviously made a mistake here. Easy enough to fix. Now when I do that, finally, I can go here, hit the sheep moves out of the way. I can now safely reach my chest, and I click the chest, that opens the chest, and there will be treasure. Something interesting inside, maybe a key that unlocks the next level. I'll leave that to you because our 20 minutes are over. I hope you've enjoyed making this game, and I hope now you're going to make lots of amazing isometric adventure games. See you soon for the next episode. Thanks for watching.